broadcasting the same things over and over again, it does not repeat. Instead of silencing us, it encourages us to sing or to speak, to make radio ourselves. Instead of merely broadcasting at us, we listen through it. Imagine radio sounding out the ways we perceive the resonant world through technology. And imagine radio as a specific way of moving, as a frame in which you consider the world. But because of the way sound and listening work, we are never able to step back from it. We are never able to get a bird's eye view of the sound. We are never able to perform or Donna Haraway's voice, the God trick, a vanishing act which is supposedly managed to extricate the soul from your body and environment, to view your own perceptions from the worldly position. Sound implicates you, your body, and which it resonates. And this audience has a particular perspective, a singular kind of knowledge that is made up of your memories, dreams, and desires, as much as it is everyday experiences. Radio then? The next is listening carefully to the world around us and to ourselves within it, that acknowledges how entangled we are with our surroundings, our living and non-living inhabitants within these surroundings. Etymologists require that the object of knowledge be pictured as an actor and agent, not a screen or a ground or a resource, never friendly, a slave to the master, that closes off the dialectic and its unique agency of authorship, of objective knowledge. Accounts of the real world do not then depend on the logic of discovery, but on the power-charged socialization. Conversation. Imagine curation as a conversation, rather than...
He's a passionate sound artist and composer who doesn't just have sound and art in his body and mind, but also on his skin, literally. You can listen, by the way, to one of his pieces here on the campus. It's called The Continuous Noise. It's on the stair steps next to the food room, one corridor away. He just finished his master degree here at the University of Applied Science Darmstadt and will start being a lecturer. I'm very happy to introduce him here today. He's a colleague and also a friend, Alexander Bejnovic.
Yeah. this yet. I hope. Oh yeah, that'd be good. Okay, may I ask how many of you attended the 3D audio workshop? Natasha, you did? You also?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Anyway. All right. So, when I wanted to compose my first soundscape composition with the spatial sound wave system, this is the system that we are working here on the campus, which is designated as a 3D audio system, I found myself in a very special situation. The soundscape that I recorded in the field could only be addressed to a single virtual loudspeaker or object. Means I was not able to split single sounds from the whole soundscape, to edit them separately. So I was not really able to act like a sound architect with many single sounds to build a virtual landscape. Though the problem is, I don't like to spend time in the recording studio. I'm a field recorder or soundscaper, however you like to call it. I love to be outside and encounter the soundscape just as it is, without having much control over it. This started to keep me thinking of the effect of space while I'm moving the object containing the whole soundscape through space. I asked myself, how would a keynote or a sound mark change in its meaning when it's comprehended with an agile space? How does the acoustic horizon that enables me to listen into space interact with an agile space? I was mostly interested in the artistic and aesthetic side of space, which at the end I see it as a dramaturgical tool and an essential part of 3D soundscape composition and more. In addition, this research builds up upon a critique of today's use of terms like space, 3D audio, immersion, and virtual reality. During the past years, I was able to listen to many productions in several venues, listening to talks about 3D audio and virtual reality, and I came to the conclusion that we are in a total confusion of terminologies. From a technical perspective, 3D audio systems are handled as a consumable product. Also with our spatial sound wave system. Those terms are actually used mostly for marketing purposes. From an artistic point of view, the term immersion is used as an aesthetic of overwhelming that rather hypes the innovative technology without the awareness that immersion has a long cultural, historical tradition. Furthermore, due to the fact if artists take space as something for granted, the results leads often to an unmotivated productive approach. Besides that, the possibility to place or freeze sounds in space leads to an attitude that we are able to depict reality, which, in my opinion, is a total naive thinking. In my opinion, 3D audio is an instrument that can educate our listening perception. We in the Soundscape and Environmental Media Lab on the campus are interested in the artistic side of 3D audio with a reference to the soundscape terminology and media ecology to enable new design principles which are not applicable with previous channel system, for example, stereo, 5.1, surround, and so on. So if you decide to go to Natasha's workshop today or listen to the Cappuccino closer to the sounds, to the compositions, I hope you will get a good impression of it. Let's talk about space. For thousands of years, several disciplines try to interpret what space is. Unfortunately, I cannot go too deep because of the lack of time I have for this presentation, but let me say this. When I work on 3D soundscape compositions, space is for me a concept that is malleable and changeable, triggered through our cultural influences. Means space is not something, as Euclid explained, homogeneous, uniform, continuous. Neither that space is not a substance, as the old Greeks understood it, in which a reality is formed by the things that they are placed in an empty space, so an empty container, so to say. The space by several 3D audio softwares is defined in a Cartesian coordinate system. René Descartes himself saw the space as a substance, as well figures. He described them as an expansion into length, width, and depth. Finally, those are the coordinates, x, y, z. Such abstraction of space leads to a split between human being and the outside world. But when we recall the fact, as Neil Postman said, that the medium is a technology in which a culture grows, so our understanding of space is changing. For example, the key moment in the Renaissance was the introduction of the perspective that alienated especially the Western world. It shifted the ratio senses from an auditive into visual space. Marshall McLuhan remarked the fixed point of view as the consequence by the linear perspective. The viewer is detached and not involved in the scenery, whereas the acoustic space is horizonless and boundless. And indeed, our ears receive sounds from all directions because we live in a 360-degree, in a three-dimensional environment. And talking about environments, we understand media as environments. It means every technology creates an environment that changes the social pattern, our senses, our behavior, and space. How are environments and space connected? Both are processes which structures are invisible, but can only be experienced through a conscious being and awareness. The environment is a spatial one, but not in the mathematical, rather in a philosophical way. As Martin Heidegger said, the environment, which in his understanding is another word for world, is a sphere of meanings. So everything or object refers to another one to become a whole. And here we see in parallel Murray Schafer estimates that a sound refers to another one and completes a soundscape, a Gestalt. So let me be more specific. We cannot understand space if we put ourselves outside of it, where the person is at one side and the space is on the other side. We as humans are in constant interaction with space, so it would be more interesting to ask how space completes us as human beings. So let's get back to the frame of 3D audio. As we talk here about virtual reality, we need to clarify this terminological confusion. Virtual reality, as nowadays understood, is a calculated space enabled by technological devices. But in fact, as Schafer has shown, in the 17th century, the musician inventor Athanasius Kircher made an attempt to create virtual reality when he introduced theories of volume differences, reverb effects, and varieties of instrumental positions. The very interesting point is that Schafer emphasized was that the attempt to exceed the present refers to a desideratum of human beings. And before technology appears, people created their own world by their dreams, thoughts, and wishes. And they are indeed pursued as virtual. So what is the role of the artist here? McLuhan put hope especially into the artist who facilitates the environment by presenting a counter environment, or as he called it, an anti-environment. This forward-oriented approach can be achieved by understanding the structure of the medium, the specific phenomena of perception, and critical approach by turning up the media on itself, but at the same time to find the aesthetics in it. So an artist has the role as a facilitator. The next one I would like to talk about is a theory of understanding space as a concept relating with 3D soundscape composition. As we are in the environment, interacting with space, so is the genre soundscape composition understood as a reflection of the inner attitude towards an encounter with the soundscape. Therefore, the intention here is not to depict reality, which would comprehend a certain truth, and Jean-François Lyotard had criticized that in the spirit of postmodernism, the notion that we are able to depict reality. Since I work in 3D audio, I was interested to deconstruct a system that leads us into a rigid and even dogmatic way of listening and facilitating meaning without the chance to even question it. It is well known that immersive scenarios make it quite impossible that the listener can distance him or herself from. The autonomy of listening is here restricted. Anyway, in the frame of this talk, I would like to contribute to the discourse with the term of deconstruction that is considered rather as a paradox than as a method. To adapt it into my research, my 3D soundscape composition is not forming in a given space, rather it forms a space. The deconstructive space detaches the delusion of depicting reality. It opens not a final interpretation, but reveals the possibilities of interpretation. It allows the interaction between the virtual space and the outside world. The domination of the real virtual space over outside world starts here to dissipate as the virtual space becomes stable. Pauses and gaps in compositions are not only used for dramaturgical reasons, but also to bring the outside world in, to intensify the listener's feeling. At the end, 3D soundscape composition opens a room. In German we would say Spielraum, of reflection and contemplation. Moreover, they indicate an aesthetic world without idealization. To deconstruct means as well to reformulate sounds that already happened when we reached the age of schizophrenia. That was after the invention of the telephone and the phonograph. The splitting of the sounds from its original source and electroacoustic reproduction changed also the symbolic content of sounds. Furthermore, by reformulating the sounds means to move away from the perception of sounds that is formed by language. Heidegger said, it is very complex and difficult to listen to the pure sound. As language is at the end very subjective, it doesn't have the only one accessible truth. As I referred before to dreams, for example, the author Arnold Strindberg used the term of dreams in a non-spatial and time-related criteria of order. Rather, they appear inconsistent, which they form new patterns of imagination, experience, and absurdity. We need also to ask, what happens to the listener in a deconstructive space? Well, the listener is challenged, without a sweet spot, to explore his or her position in the sphere of the composer's inner conflict. In this case, exploring the position does not only mean where is the right spot, but how much involvement is possible when they encounter fragments of reflections. As my title says, the Poetics of Space in 3D Audio, I got inspired very much by Gaston Bachelard, where he studied the poetic pictures that reader dreams up in poetries and books. For Bachelard, those poetic pictures arouses from the power of imagination related to space. His approaches of the intimate space in poetries like the house, the angle, the inside, and the outside, do trigger some ideas that adapted when working with 3D audio. He explained that we interact with the spaces, and by that it saves our thoughts, dreams, and memories in those spaces. It is to emphasize that Bachelard's approach is a phenomenological one. That means the intention focuses on the act of experience. His view of the angle, the most intensive feeling of the spatial being, characterizes a position where the recipient remains in contemplation. The inside and outside is perceived as a juxtaposition, like a yes and no, as the border between the inside, like a yes and no, as the consequence of the geometrical fixation. This fixation alters us in the way these border between the inside and outside become barriers. So Bachelard's central point is to change the Euclidean space perception into an agile space. And although Bachelard is dealing here mostly with another medium, which is the written word, I'm sure that such thoughts can help us to understand the potential of space in 3D audio. So, my conclusion, if we understand space as a concept, we can understand 3D audio and even virtual reality not as a machinery of entertainment. We artists need to find methods to create awareness for the digital environment without highlighting technocratic picture, but rather an aesthetic consciousness for it. Otherwise, we will achieve the moment of reification of space and virtual reality. Space is not given. It is a philosophical, existential part of us. The spatial soundwave system and other programs do render the sounds, but the real renderer is here. In comprehension with sound, I want to end my presentation with the words of Roland Barthes. All sounds are belonging to me, concerning me, going to me. I am the addressee of the unknown sound. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you too for this presentation. Now we have some time to ask questions and to start a discussion on what we just heard. Yes, please.
Thank you. That was really instructive and inspiring. And this may be a technical question, but is it possible to have a 3D audio system set up outdoors?
Well, we never tried it, but
Yeah.
I think it would be.
You said
possible.
something about like letting the outside in, and so like you're creating.
Yeah.
This might be an interesting.
Yeah. Of course, yeah.
Relationship there.
Yes. Because it doesn't matter where you put the system.
Yeah, as long as
Somehow you have still two spaces. One is the virtual, and the other is, well, some call it the physical world, but then I would refer too much into this physical thing, which I want a little bit to move away from. So I call it the outside world. Yeah. I don't have the right term in English. We in Germany call Außenwelt. Yeah. So, but that's good that you mentioned it. I was thinking more also when we are inside. Yeah. So just imagine, and also if you guys are going to listen to our compositions there, which I really suggest to do that. Usually, when we talk about immersion, for me, it's like you're kind of cut off of this concept.
Yeah.
So, as I said, usually this is one. I don't say that it's wrong, but there are several methods of designing. One is if you have a lot of single sounds, and you have much control about it, and then you make actually your space. And as I said before, I go out with my microphone, with my field recorder, and I record. And then you have the whole soundscape in one object. Yeah? So if you work with stereo, and then you have headphones, all right, you are there, as Schaeffer says, that the space is in your head. But now you have one object, and here's the soundscape, the whole soundscape. What is there? What is this here? Yeah. So this is what I'm very kind of into, that this correlation, yeah, this playing between two spaces, right? So, hope this answers your question, but thanks. I think it would be a nice spot here to put our sound. We had the locations.
You'd be in this controlled environment, and then you recreate, and it's kind of this illusionistic relationship of why not put it, into the real world, but people pass through the sounds, but
because the thing is about immersion, it's like, it's a very used as an effect of overwhelming. It's like, wow, and it's just a wow effect. But I'm pointing more that I put the listener more into focus. Our sensual perception, which is listening. So, as I said, to really pursue space, you have to be like the complete awareness of being. Yeah. Yes, yes.
Thank you for your talk. I've got three things to say. Just in response to Eric's comment, it might be worth looking at some of Peter Batchelor's work. He's based in the UK, but he has created...
Whose work?
Peter Batchelor.
Oh, yeah.
He's created small domes that you can, that are like tents, but they have holes in them, you can put them outside, so he did install them for a conference for us, with surrounding loudspeakers, so you can, a participant can sit inside it and have the recordings be immersed, but also be outside in the open air, so we have that interaction with the real world and this virtual world as well, which is quite interesting. I also have a comment about immersion, just in that I understand what you're saying about immersion being sort of all-encompassing and taking over, and that kind of understanding of the word, but I also see it as something quite different, and I think you can have immersive sound which holds the listener, which does, encompass the listener, but it doesn't have to it can still be at a much lower level, it can still be quiet, it can still have space for other things to interact. And I just I work a lot with multi-channel sound and ambisonics, and
you're absolutely right. Well, of course, I have on one side this critical point of view immersion because it's too common used. On the other hand, we have, of course, also from the students and my colleagues that compositions that are kind of immersion, but they are differently conceptualized. They really thought it well. Yeah, how to place the sound, how to make a dramaturgy. Yeah, because again, it's not about only to entertain here, but it's also about the listening. How we can use this technology to make awareness, to bring awareness of listening, right? With this kind of technologies. And when we go further, and this is more now from the media ecological point of view, virtual reality is already here. And those products that became consumable, what effect will that have on us, right? So this is what I'm very interested as well. But you're totally fine about, right about immersion, that it can also be good.
And have you, I mean, in terms of, you're talking about your stereo microphone being, and your stereo recording being a good place there, but if you create an ambisonic recording, then you have a 3D recording.
Yeah, but I don't want to do ambisonics.
You don't want to?
Right. I want to be free in my when I work out. No, I usually use my Zoom H6, and I want to be able to move. And I'm not always like in the let's say in the forest or something. I'm also like I don't know in conflict zone.
You can have a handheld microphone.
Yeah.
The ambient microphone is like that big. So.
Yeah, but there are also like bigger ones. So I try to be kind of more. Not to have to be obvious.
No, but that's what I'm saying. I mean, now the technology now is so yeah. If you were taking the soundfield microphone outside, then it's huge and it's big. But if you've taken the Sennheiser Ambio, for example, it's a handheld microphone and it doesn't look any different. I mean, it's slightly larger than your Zoom maybe, but you can plug it into your Zoom.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I guess you're right, but. I don't know what would be the difference if you then if you work with our systems. Yeah.
This is true.
So this is what's going to be the difference?
I haven't looked at this 3D so I don't know how the system works.
But thank you very much. I mean, I can consider them. I think I was a little bit harsh in answering that I don't want to, but I'm so used to my Zoom.
Yeah, I mean, I say we work with Zoom, and I won't use that all the time here, but I've used it quite a lot if you're looking at data. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Just a quick comment on that. Having heard both the 3D and the ambisonics with David Monacchi in Italy, who records ambisonic, the effects are very similar in the final sort of dome-like listening situation. And because David also deals with environmental sounds, you have that very similar kind of presence of the environment, but also that sense of the outside and you as the listener. So I think in terms of the end effect, it's actually quite similar. You're right about, I mean, David carries huge amounts of technology into the jungle, and it's a lot of work.
Because at the end, if you work with our system, at the end you can only work with monofiles. All right, so we have to stop the discussion at this point. Thank you very much again. Next presentation from an Australian sound artist, composer, and researcher. I think you all know her. It's Leah Barkley. She is the president of the Australian Forum for Acoustic Ecology, and her topic will be listening to ecosystems. Unfortunately, she cannot be here today physically, but Eric Leonardson will kind of represent her today. And she also sent us a video with her presentation, which we will have a look at. And yeah, I will just play it, or do you want to?
I just want to say a brief word. Since Leah can't be here, and she just wanted to say hello and thank you. And she's really sorry that she is unable to be here with us, and I'm sure we would just really love to have her company and time to chat with her. But she also wanted you to know that she will be online to answer questions on Twitter. So if you have internet access and you're using Twitter, you can contact her at her handle is @Leah Barkley, and she'll be able to answer questions that way. I'm wondering maybe we could go online and after her presentation and maybe project that if you do open a web browser and get into Twitter.
Yeah.
And then, or maybe I can even log in as WFAE or something and try to field questions. Although I can't really type, I'm just a hot and packed typer.
Yeah, we can totally do that.
Yeah.
Let's do it online.
Yeah.
But first, let's watch the presentation. Right?
Yeah, let's go ahead and watch that.
My name's Leah Barkley. I'm coming to you from Australia. I'm really sorry I can't be there in person. It looks like an incredible conference and looks like you're all having an amazing time. I just wanted to thank the conference committee for allowing me to present remotely. So I'm going to keep this pretty brief, but basically I'm going to talk about a series of quite interdisciplinary acoustic ecology projects, and most of my work at the moment is focused around this idea of listening to ecosystems and really looking at the intersection of art and science in that process, the artistic and the scientific possibilities of listening. So my background is as a sound artist and composer. In the last 5 years, I've got very involved in the scientific side of field recording, looking at sound as a tool for biodiversity analysis, and all of my work basically uses field recordings from the environment in immersive installations and performances and augmented reality and virtual reality installations. In addition to terrestrial recordings, a lot of my work revolves around aquatic ecosystems, and I use hydrophones as a pretty central tool to my practice. So I currently lead a series of large-scale interdisciplinary research projects around acoustic ecology. One of those being Biosphere Soundscapes, which has been quite active for many years in different parts of the world and is very much a collaborative project in working with a lot of different organisations, a lot of different scientists and artists and community leaders in different parts of the world. And this has really allowed me to explore ways that communities really interact with their sonic environment in different parts of the world, whether that's in very remote parts of Cambodia or biosphere reserves through Mexico to desert landscapes through Central Australia. And it's really inspired me to think about sound in different ways. And I think one of the most exciting things through this project has been really looking at that intersection between art and science and working with scientists who specialise in particular species to really find out how we can use the sound of those species to better understand the health of the environment. And, you know, when we're talking about wetlands or freshwater ecosystems, there's been quite limited research around many coniferous species. So it's been exciting in the last few years to particularly look at freshwater fish, to find some fish that we didn't actually think made sound several years ago, and many of the scientists I was working with didn't either, and now we've been able to document that they do. And similar sorts of approaches on the Great Barrier Reef, for example, just to discover how different species actually use sound to navigate and survive. I'm just going to play you a tiny sample of soundscapes on the Great Barrier Reef, just to give you a sense of that sonic environment. So that was the sound of fish and snapping shrimp, and as you can see, a very rich and dynamic sonic environment. So for me, I've really been advocating for this idea of acoustic ecology as this umbrella term to capture all of the really rich interdisciplinary practice that's happening in sound at the moment, from the arts and humanity traditions that we all know so well to these very exciting emerging practices in ecoacoustics. And to be honest, I was quite skeptical of ecoacoustics for a good couple of years and critical of some of the papers that were coming out that weren't necessarily acknowledging the history of acoustic ecology, and I am still quite critical of some of those papers. But I think what's really interesting about this field is just the kind of rapid engagement around it in the last few years. And if we look at this, dictionary definition of ecoacoustics, I'm sure many of you in the room would argue that it's quite similar to acoustic ecology, or what we could consider contemporary acoustic ecology, and I completely agree. And I've been kind of shocked in a way just to see the amount of particularly students, often with a science background or an engineering background, coming into ecoacoustics or bioacoustics, and this amazing engagement, particularly in the Asia Pacific region, we hosted an ecoacoustics workshop early last year, very little advertising, and ended up with a couple of hundred people. And we hosted the International Ecoacoustics Congress in June, July this year. And that was, again, quite a remarkable gathering of all of these different practitioners really working at the intersection of art and science. And naturally, this was endorsed by the World Forum for Acoustic Ecology and was this great opportunity to really interrogate some of these ideas. And what I found really interesting about a lot of the work that's happening in ecoacoustics is, we all know that bioacoustics approaches often work with relatively low quality recording equipment. We're seeing this quality improve quite dramatically in recent years, but it's sort of notoriously been low sample rates, often mono, highly compressed recordings, and many of us have been quite critical of those processes. And I've been fascinated by this idea of installing many of these recorders in the field across very large spatial landscapes, having terabytes and terabytes of data that you're bringing back into the studio, intensely analyzing this, running this through recognizers and algorithms, and pushing out all of this data. And particularly with younger students that I've started to engage with through some of this process, just kind of wondering, where listening was in that whole kind of field process of ecoacoustics. And pretty shocked to find that in the context, talking purely from a scientific side of things, not really taught, students not really being encouraged to listen in the field, not really being encouraged to listen to the data that they're collecting, or use, the incredible capacity of their auditory perception in actually listening to the outcomes from the perspective of analysis. So in the last couple of years, I've really advocated for listening to be a vital component to these scientific studies in ecoacoustics, and naturally, pushing that into this umbrella field of acoustic ecology as well. And that's had some really exciting outcomes to look at, how artists and scientists think about sound in the field, how we listen, putting a young scientist and a young composer together in the field to make decisions about where to place a microphone or a hydrophone to monitor a particular species of fish, and really having that dialogue about understanding our sonic environment from different perspectives. And that sort of idea of perspectives on listening has really underpinned my practice for the last decade. It's what is at the heart of the Biosphere Soundscapes project, the idea of bringing artists and scientists together in an ecosystem to better understand it, so we can find better ways to protect it together collaboratively. So it's been interesting just to see that dynamic of arts and science and these perspectives on listening. And so that's really informed the development of quite a large body of research that's based in Brisbane in Australia at the moment, across multiple universities, really pushing this idea of sound as a tool to understand environmental health and engage communities in the environment. So this is really all about embedding this work back in communities as well. And again, for me, working with this very exploratory technology, I've really advocated for the accessibility of these projects in the context of communities, as the generation that is going to face the true ramifications of climate change. I truly believe that if we can engage young people in practices of deep listening, active listening, understanding their ecosystems and connecting with their ecosystems through sound, then I think there's hope for the future. I truly do. So it's been really important for me, even when we're working with, very experimental technologies, developing these crazy surround sound hydrophone arrays and live streaming systems, that these projects are really accessible and engaging for young people. And in parallel to that, just looking at new ways we can understand this material and work with sound in a way that it brings a wider awareness to the dramatic changes in these ecosystems. I want to play an example. I'll talk over it a little bit. So this is a project called Wetland Wonder, and it's really looking at these ideas of connecting communities to wetlands, really shifting perception over wetlands. So in one way, it's a science communication tool, an accessible way to engage audiences in conservation, but we're really exploring the way that arts can contribute towards scientific research. So we're using high resolution drone imagery that you can see on the ceiling and the floor of these installations that allows us to visually map patterns and also identify species, and using sound naturally offers us this, at this point in time, pretty revolutionary way to understand changing ecosystems. So all of the sounds in this work are from wetland ecosystems across Queensland, and all of the material is being used for both scientific research and naturally artistic interpretations of these environments. So you can hear very familiar sounds, birds and frogs, and the more unfamiliar material is recorded underwater using hydrophones. So these include aquatic insects, snapping shrimp, and fish that can naturally all be indicators of ecosystem health. And when we think about, the impacts of climate change are often very visible in terrestrial environments, but these dramatic changes in aquatic ecosystems are going unnoticed simply due to visibility. So listening, beneath the surface really offers us a new way to understand these ecosystems and connect with wetlands. And the final compositions in this work highlight the soundscapes of the Great Barrier Reef, and it's really about using acoustic ecology to highlight that interconnected nature of Queensland's aquatic ecosystems and reveal these acoustic patterns and rhythms of these environments we might not usually think about. And the projections and soundscapes also feature quotes from Indigenous communities who have played a critical role in the development of the project. And we see this project as an art-science collaboration that's deeply respectful of Indigenous knowledge systems. And as artists and scientists, we acknowledge that we still have so much to learn from these complex knowledge systems that have listened and worked harmoniously with the environment for thousands of years. So I just want to finish by playing a tiny sample from one of my most recent installations just from a few days ago, a project called Listening Underwater, again bringing artists and scientists together to deeper understand our aquatic environments through sound and layering those soundscapes with Indigenous knowledge systems. The voice you'll hear is Lyndon Davis, an Indigenous elder on the Sunshine Coast of Australia who I've worked with for the last decade, looking at ways that we can use sound and technology and traditional knowledge to connect people to the environment. Thank you very much.
Used the vibrations of a spear tap on the water to call out to a dolphin, to signal a dolphin to come and help us catch some mullet. We're using some Morse code. And this dolphin, he can hear all these other sounds going on in the ocean, but then he hears this tap on the shore, and he's oh, that's my Earth brothers there. I better go and help them two leg fellas out. You know what I mean? And that I find that story amazing, that our families used to communicate on that type of level, and they were in unison with the call, and they knew the call, and they knew exactly what the call was for, and so they started to scare the fish back towards where the call was coming from, and then after the hunt, the catch was shared with the dolphins, and made sure a portion of it was given back to them, hand feed them just like you do now, but having that real strong connection with them, and almost like talking to you, and when you're a family, they're a family out there in the water.
Okay, I guess that's it.